tangible ways that we can leverage AI. So with that being said, I would love to hand it over to the panel to introduce themselves, and then you have to tell us your favorite thing to use AI for, personal or professional.
Okay, should I start?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. What a great event so far. I am Ariana. I am the VP of Talent Planning and Acquisition at Greenhouse Software. And Greenhouse is your altogether hiring platform. We have about 7,000 customers globally that use our platform to make hiring more inclusive and purposeful and efficient. A little bit about me. I am originally from New York City, very proud about that. But I currently live in Vegas, which someone told me the other day, it is a sunny place for shady people. And I'm like, I want to be one of the sunny people in this sunny place. So that is like my life goal right now. And the good thing is the conferences also come to me. So that's a little bit about me. And the thing that I recently used AI for, and I thought I was so smart about it, but I'm sure most of you have done it, is I was taking a trip to London with my husband, and we were like touring the Tower of London, and we took out AI, and we were like, hey, give me a history rundown of the Tower of London, but in Shakespearean sonnets. And it did it like amazingly beautifully, and we're like, wow, this is very fun. So then we asked it to give us a tour in the tone of Game of Thrones. So we're just having a lot of fun with it, but that is the most recent way I used it.
Love that. Anisha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anisha Thomas, head of people at Inscribe AI, where we're building AI agents for risk teams at financial services to prevent fraud. I was born and raised in San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm just excited to be here to share my perspective and learnings on how to make AI work for the business. And my favorite thing to use AI for is actually an AI-powered app to predict when my toddler should go to bed. If you're a parent, let's talk about tips and tricks outside later. But yeah, based on her sleeping patterns, it helps to detect her optimal bedtime, and it's just been a lifesaver because when she sleeps, I sleep.
I love that. Once you figure out the rest of the parenting piece with AI, let me know. So Gianna Driver here. I'm the Chief People Officer of Lattice, joined a couple of months ago. Super excited to be here. And I use AI for personal things almost daily. So anyone who knows me knows that I am a terrible cook. And so I ask AI almost daily what to make for dinner with a very small subset of ingredients. And I'm still alive, and my child is also still alive. So the power of AI is real.
I love that. There's a group called Women Defining AI that I joined, and a woman in there shared that she felt that she had been overcharged for a medical bill, and she had ChatGPT write her a script that saved her $500 on her medical bill. So I haven't tried that one yet, but it's the one I'm most excited about. Let's talk a little bit about, there's a lot of buzz around AI. You all lead successful teams. Let's talk about a humbling moment with regard to AI. And I will start with Ariana.
Many humbling moments, but I think it started off with, I don't know what AI is. Like, if someone asked me, how do you define AI, I would be at a loss for words. So one of the first things that I did, and this was not even that long ago, it was just like a few months ago, I was Googling AI. I started reading research papers from universities, and I'm like, I really want to know the difference between automation, AI, and machine learning. Because I feel like, I think a lot of us are people leaders right now. We're trying to sift through a lot of the noise of so many vendors and products, and everyone's slapping AI onto their software saying this is like the next big thing. How do you make sense of that, and how do you cut through the noise? And I think just starting off with, do I know what the difference between automation and AI is? That was like a really fundamental thing for me to understand. And if all of you are wondering that question, the very simple definition that I landed on was automation is basically when you take like predetermined rules and ask a machine to do something or a robot to do something. And AI is basically something that mimics human intelligence, and it's technology that can essentially make decisions for itself. So I really like the simplicity of that, and I've repeated that to myself many times. But simply going to the root of what is the definition of AI? Because everyone is saying it. And sometimes erroneously, I think is a good place to start.
Did you start by asking AI?
I should have, right?
Seems like you did a lot
But
of
was
research.
I asking AI or was it something else? Yeah.
Anisha.
Yeah, I also went on a similar journey of just trying to understand what's the difference between co-pilot or agents, and so had to go through that learning curve. Yeah, for me, I realized I should never be hired to be a prompt engineer. I'm not great at crafting prompts. I remember this one time our CEO, Ronan, asked to know where the exact percentile everyone was at in their salary bands. I've never pulled this data before or have access to it, and so I was like, okay, let's just see what ChatGPT comes up with. And I just kept going in circles where it just became unproductive that I ended up calling one of my colleagues to help figure it out. And what I realized was I was using ChatGPT more as a Google search, and so I really had to understand the data that I'm actually inputting and the precise prompts I'm asking to actually see the value and the power ChatGPT can have.
Love that. Gianna, a humbling moment?
There have been so many humbling moments, Mendy. The one that comes to mind quickly is at my last company, this was about 2 years ago, we knew that AI was a hot thing, and I had so many colleagues that touted all of the wonderful attributes of AI. It allowed for faster this, cheaper that, et cetera, et cetera. And so I gave a very broad initiative to the team and said, let's go use AI. On our team. Fabulous. I thought, oh, wow, like how innovative and cool are we? Come back, a few months later, and there was essentially nothing. And it was super humbling because I realized that I was approaching it from the wrong stance. I was approaching it from a place of, let's use AI because AI is the hot, new, cool thing that everyone's talking about, and we should be doing it because everyone says we should be doing it, as opposed to the insight being, let's start with a problem statement and be really clear about how we want to leverage AI to create value for us and help us solve this specific problem. And so it was pretty humbling to realize, oh, wow, like you need clarity. You need to be very specific when you're going to use these tools.
Yeah, and even fast forward 2 years from when you had those initial conversations, we still have to root ourselves back and what are we trying to solve for? Because there are so many AI vendors and there are so many complexities and nuances, and it's like, what are we trying to do, right? So clarity is an important one. What are the other core considerations that you think companies need to think about that they need to align on as they're rolling out AI technologies and processes? And I will hand this over to Anisha.
Yeah, great question. So 3 considerations that I'd probably start with is strategic alignment, and then an operational consideration such as resourcing, and then some sort of enablement change management plan. And so at Inscribe, we first, as a leadership team, started out with the question of why do we want to invest in AI in the first place? Well, we're building AI agents, so we should actually be AI enabled internally, so there isn't a disconnect between what we're building and how we're operating internally. And that, in order to build trust and buy-in with our internal team and also with our customers. So once we aligned on that, we're like, okay, we're not super operationally heavy. We're a very small company, 50 people, and so we really needed to understand what is the biggest problem we're trying to solve for with AI? What are we trying to optimize for? A lot of ideas came up, but we landed on one. And we realized we need to actually enhance our dev experience and environment for our engineers because we need them to ship code faster because that aligns with our business goal of finding PMF and generating revenue. And that led us to a next discussion of, okay, how do we go about this? And so we can hold an internal hackathon, or we can invest in external AI solutions. And we landed on doing external AI solutions because we couldn't take our engineers away from building our product and speaking to our customers. Then we're now in like an enablement phase and testing out different solutions. We're running into some compliance issues, and so conversation's still going, but we're trying to just create a culture of experimenting with AI.
I love that. Gianna, what do you think about alignment that's critical before, as you're launching this stuff?
Yeah, I think alignment is very important as Anisha gets her mic. just a little, the alignment of microphones is also equally important to alignment of AI. Thank you. No, but what comes to mind for me is, I think at the company highest levels, there needs to be alignment, right? If we're going to lean into AI, let's be clear about use cases, let's be clear about some of the parameters that are okay, and similarly some of the parameters that are not okay. At Lattice, one of the things that I learned, and I don't take credit for this because I wasn't here when this was started, Mendy, I think you were, Lattice created a committee that was an AI committee. It was a cross-functional team of people who were, yes, HR was represented, so was legal and security and IT and other groups, and that committee really created the North Star, if you will, for how AI will be used. And this is something, the highest levels of leadership we're also bought into. And I think when we have that, then you can sort of, find all of the various use cases, but it does take that alignment cross-functionally at the very top to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had representation from security and legal and IT, and it was like we were all in a room, and it allowed us to sprint and move faster, but not at the risk of breaking things or moving too fast. And then we also heard from the business. We had representation from EPD and marketing, and really trying to understand those use cases so it wasn't just being inundated with vendors to review, but actual problems we were trying to solve. So let's talk a little bit more about the practical use cases that you've seen in our world, in HR and TA. What are the most meaningful, game-changing use cases you've seen to date, and what excites you most about them? Anisha, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I promise I wasn't paid or told to say this, but Lattice's AI engagement.
Yes.
I know, I didn't know we were going to talk more about it, but we just ran our engagement survey, and I didn't realize how much time last year my team and I were spending going through the open-ended comments. And not just only about saving time, but how prone to human error and bias that manual process was. And so I just appreciated this time around that work was already done for me. I just had to read through what the summary of the themes that were pulled out were, the clear recommendations. But what I also loved is that I was in the driver's seat still, where I could make the final decision of, are we going to actually act on it this way, and have that final call, essentially.
I love that. Yeah. Gianna, how about you?
Love that. Yeah, she actually wasn't paid by Lattice to say that. I love that. So the question was around some practical use cases that we've done. So an example that comes to mind that we've been experimenting with very successfully the last several weeks is, and maybe some of you can relate to this, I often spend my days in back-to-back meetings. And in those back-to-back meetings, I am amassing a laundry list of to-dos. And oftentimes, I am spending my evenings after Abigail, my daughter, goes to bed, reviewing my notes and then, synthesizing and coming up with my master to-do list that's, bits and pieces of all of the various meetings that I've had. And so what Mendy and Kate and some other people on the team and I talked about is we said, well, let's try to leverage AI to help us solve this problem. So now what I do is in my meetings, and most of them are Zoom meetings, so this is a kind of Zoom AI-enabled thing. I have AI sit with me in the meetings, so the meetings are recorded. Now, obviously in HR, sometimes we have content that is, you don't want an AI sitting in your meeting, so then I pause the recording then. And in certain meetings, I don't even do any recording, but I'm talking about, where this is appropriate. So AI sits in the meetings and takes notes, essentially, and then transcribes all of this. The team has created a recap wizard where then we go into the Zoom recordings, we simply copy paste into our recap wizard, and there's a beautiful list of all of the to-dos from that day's meetings. Then what we do is pop that into Lattice, the tool, and in a one-on-one that I have a recurring one-on-one every day, that's where literally it's like a checklist of everything. And so, this probably saves me per day, call it 20 to 30 minutes, which might not sound like a lot, but 20 to 30 minutes per day is actually a lot in aggregate. And so it's something that I'm excited to do. Now, if I could get better about actually crossing off the to-dos, then that'd be magical. But it's been
You
great.
should have seen the look that Gianna gave me when I told her we might need to get rid of the notepad she had next to her desk. So we're slowly but surely iterating and also working on that. I love that. What about you, Ariana?
Also, an extremely happy Lattice customer over here. I'd actually love to provide a few examples from Greenhouse, obviously. And I think I wanted to provide two, because there's a lot of talk around how are we using AI to be more efficient in our jobs as companies. And I wanted to provide an example around that, but I also wanted to provide an example around how are we also maintaining our ability to provide great experiences for candidates and be inclusive. So I'll start off with the first one. So one of my team's most favorite features is something we call Talent Finder or talent filtering. I think one of the things we're all challenged with right now, if you're on the recruiting side, is you post a job. We call it a job flash, because if you post it for too long, you get like thousands of applicants, and then you're just like overwhelmed with all this stuff, all these applications to review. What our Talent Finder AI does in product is it allows you to search for key terms on a resume, so that if you're looking for a chat support agent and they need experience with Zendesk or live chat, then you can put in those words into the filter and it will pull up the resumes out of your pool of thousands and thousands of resumes, so that you can review them in a way that makes it so you're reviewing resumes that have a most relevant match to what you're looking for first. So essentially takes the task of resume review, which is like historically chronological. You reviewed applications as they came in and made them and filters them in a way that's most relevant to what you're looking for. So I think you can all kind of imagine how that can save time, make recruiters efficient. Great. The second example is like a personal favorite of mine, because it's also a nod to how do we have technology help us create and maintain inclusive processes. And we have another aspect of our product that anonymizes resumes. And so we use this resume parsing AI feature that essentially strips personal identifiable information, like your name, educational institutions where you worked, from the resume, so whoever's reading your resume is really focusing on the skill set. So we have that at the application review stage. And then we also have the capability to anonymize take-home assessments. So essentially, I think a lot of us are familiar with recruiting processes where at some point later in the process, you ask a candidate to submit some sort of form of work or some sort of work product that you can interact with. And we ran this really powerful study across 400,000 applicants that were applying across Greenhouse customers. And we saw that when customers use the anonymization feature at the take-home test stage, the pass-through rate, meaning how many people moved forward, was up to 10% higher when they did not know who the take-home test was attached to. And I thought that was a really powerful story, because sometimes you have a screen with someone, a phone call, and then you send them an assignment, and you're like, I'm really excited about this person. Maybe the assignment wasn't up to your satisfaction, but because you had a great screen with them and you know who they are, you're going to pass them forward. And the opposite might take effect. And so I think the data speaks for itself, that when you anonymize and you strip kind of the information of who this person is, it can actually increase inclusivity.
Yeah, and Ariana, that makes me think too, we're in an interesting position working for companies in TA and HR that are servicing customers in TA and HR, right? We also play a role internally, not just with our employee base, but also influencing product direction, right? And I feel like TA was one of the early kind of testing divisions within AI, because there was so much, it was so ripe for opportunities to leverage AI, right? You've been doing this for a couple years now,
Yeah.
Right? Kind of ahead of the game.
Well, it was not an easy path. There was a lot of conversations with legal, a lot of conversations with security. I can now say they're my friends, but it took a while to get there.
Yeah, and to plug Greenhouse, you all built a beautiful external AI policy, kind of.
Yes.
Talk about that, because I think that's really
Yes.
powerful.
So if I backtrack a little bit, I think one of the things that we can all agree on theoretically is if you want to create a great experience, whether it's with candidates or whether it's with employees, alumni, communicate well. Seems simple enough, right? It's simple in theory, but in reality, it's actually really hard when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of people. How do you personalize everything? How do you follow up with everyone? And when we go to the root of candidate experience, when we're talking about this at Greenhouse, we decided that it was really important to be public about our stance to our candidates about where we stand on AI in our interviewing processes. Is it okay to use AI in our interviewing processes as a candidate? Does Greenhouse's recruiting team use AI to assess candidates? And so that initial piece of expectation setting was our commitment to the talent market to be like, hey, we believe in transparency. We're all figuring this out alongside of you, but here is our current stance on what is permissible. And so if you go to Greenhouse's careers page, there is a tab that is AI guidelines in hiring. And when I first drafted this and I sent it to cross-functional stakeholders on our leadership team, I got 100+ comments in a week. And so it was like this really active discussion around how does this represent the way that we represent our own product? How do we distinguish that from what Greenhouse, the recruiting team, does? And at the end of the day, like, it's going to be an iterative form of a body of work. But it was one of those initial commitments that we wanted to signal to candidates like, hey, we want to make sure we set your expectations on how we will permit you to use AI and what your experience might be with the AI that we use in our hiring process. And that's really because we want you to have a great experience. So when we confirm interviews or schedule screens, we always put the link in those templates so that the candidates can view them.
I love that. Gianna, how do you think about AI being leveraged to identify and develop high potential employees when you're thinking about things like succession planning and leadership development?
So, confession, I would say this even if I wasn't employed by Lattice. Because what you're about to hear is going to sound like it's like sponsored by Lattice, but really and truly, this is coming from my heart. So, disclaimer out there. So you may have seen in the keynote this morning a preview of some of the tools coming out. One of the tools that I am the most excited about in our wonderful suite of new things coming out is our succession planning tool. I saw that a week or so ago, and I mean, it like my jaw dropped, and I was like, oh my gosh, because I've never seen a tool that this easily and seamlessly with like beautiful UI kind of combines all of the things that we as people strategists are so passionate about. We talk about succession planning, but so often it's like, yeah, that's important, but it's not as urgent as the other stuff going on. But our tool that we're rolling out allows people leaders to very easily integrate and do, after the talent review or the 9-box exercise, quickly identify successors. Are they ready now? Are they going to be ready, like in a year, 3 years, et cetera? Let's look at now creating an IDP or, like a competency-based learning path for them. Like, that's beautiful. And so this is something I legitimately, even if I wasn't employed by Lattice, I would be crazy excited about. And all the more I'm excited because we get to use it internally, so.
Awesome. We've talked a little bit about, clarity and driving alignment and talked about real use cases. Let's talk about how you're doing AI right. That's something that I think we're still figuring out, but how do we measure the success of AI? How are we thinking about ROI? And I'd love to hand that over to you, Gianna.
Does anyone feel like I'm on the hot seat? I'm kidding, I'm just giving you a hard time. How do we know if we're doing it right? I think if we go back to something we mentioned a few minutes ago around first understanding what is the problem statement? What is the problem I am looking to solve or make better with AI? And then from there, being clear about, let's establish a baseline. Whether it's how many resumes a recruiter goes through, how much time I spend doing XYZ task, how much effort I'm putting in for what type of output. But that baseline is really, really important. And then I think, yes, then let's use AI to do whatever it is that we've set out to do. Is that the engagement survey process is laborious after the end of the cycle. Okay, it used to take people partners, HR business partners, this amount of time. It now takes this amount of time. I think once we're able to establish a baseline, we can then measure against it and then course correct. And I will say that be ready when you do this to be okay with not always winning. Sometimes we do experiments and actually it's laborious and cumbersome and it hasn't made our life easier. Okay, well then course correct, modify. Have we enabled folks the right way? Are we leveraging the tools the right way? So don't be afraid to then sort of tweak and adjust. And then if you do all of that and realize, oh yeah, this tool didn't work for us, then that's okay. But also as you experiment, you're gonna find instances and times where AI is your friend and it really is saving the 20 or 30 minutes per day or whatever that quantum that you're measuring is.
Yeah.
So a baseline, very important.
Absolutely. That makes me think about, we just launched a people bot to answer kind of tier 1 questions that we get from our employee base. And we took a look at, quarter over quarter, how many inbound questions were we getting and which do we think the bot can adequately answer and not put us at risk or scare us HR folks. And we tried and tested it for about 6 weeks and we ended up launching it and it's reduced our Jira inbound by 50%. So I think just having the baseline and then being able to track that over time and we've had to iterate. Like it doesn't get everything right, but it's actually pretty good most of the time. What about you, Anisha?
Yeah, just +1 to that. It's easy to see the impact that AI has when you have access to pre-AI data. And if you don't, you have to set that baseline and just give yourself the opportunity to experiment and see how it goes. And I actually just think that this conversation is going to continue to evolve and we're going to be having this conversation for many, many years. Very similar to performance management and how we give feedback, because I don't think there's a perfect way of doing AI. It's so contextual to your company and culture and how you want to adopt and use AI internally.
So true. Yeah. Ariana, what about you?
Yeah, so many great things discussed so far. Building off of, Gianna, your earlier point, the one thing that I found myself wanting to say, especially with such a great group of HR leaders, is I just love to give the permission to not be perfect. And I think sometimes when we're making a use case or a business case to bring on a new AI tool, we feel like we need a crystal ball to be like, these are the ways that it will deliver on ROI. Everything is a hypothesis, right? Like, we don't know the tool yet. We might have done a really great job during the demo to understand how it's going to be implemented and what impact it might have. But I think there's always some room that you should leave for yourself to understand that it will be an iterative process. I think the other challenging thing about this environment right now is a lot of the times we see something really shiny technologically and we get super excited and we're like, this is going to change everything. But it has to go back to, well, what are you solving for? Don't start with the technology solution. Start with the problem, right? Right now, there's a lot of the reverse happening, where there's a lot of people throwing solutions at you, but only you really understand what are the problems your organization is trying to solve. And I think starting off with that is really important for you to be able to make sense of what is actually going to be helpful to you.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about what we're not going to let AI do. I think that's going to be on a lot of people's minds here as HR folks. It is our duty to protect the data and our people. So what are the things we're putting the stake in the ground and we're saying we're not going to allow AI to do that? Anisha, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah. Great question. AI, personally and as a company, we've said will not make an unsupervised final decision, especially if it's going to impact a person when it comes to a comp raise, a promotion, or even rejecting or moving forward a candidate. So for right now, that is where the stake in the ground is for us.
Ariana, stake in the ground?
My stake in the ground from the TA lens is that AI will not replace recruiters. It will replace certain aspects of things that we do, but it will not entirely replace that profession. And if I can take you on a mini history lesson with me that I learned the other day, I want to share a story. So there's a concept called the Jevons paradox. And essentially what this paradox says is that when there's some sort of innovation that leads to massive increased efficiency. Short term, you might see a reduction of a demand for a certain resource, but long term, you actually might see increase of a demand and use of a certain resource. And this paradox is named after this British economist, William Stanley Jevons, who lived around the 1860s and saw that when the steam engine was invented, it actually did not reduce the amount of coal being consumed, it actually increased it. And then we saw the same thing for gas with cars. We thought that when engines are getting super efficient, our use of gas will go down. But what we saw was when things became more efficient and accessible, then the use of it became more accessible, demand went up, and our use of it became more. Same thing with electricity. And the stake in the ground that I have in regards to recruiting is that, yes, there will be disruption in the repetitive, maybe the more rote things that we do on a daily basis. And that's great. Like, we should have technology take those things off our plate. But it will actually lead to an increased demand in really good recruiting and really strategic business partners, really strategic HR leaders that can understand the business in a way that your AI really can't. Because at the end of the day, we're in the business of people. And so that would be the stake in the ground that I'd place.
Yeah, I love that. Gianna?
Yeah, I feel very passionate that AI is here to enable and allow us to be more human. And so I will go so far as to say, firmly stake in the ground, I will not look to AI to make final decisions on hiring, on firing, on raises, on promotions, that type of thing. I look at AI as giving us information that then a human can synthesize and make the final call and decision. So again, we remain in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And that's where a lot of this anxiety and fear is coming from. And so I think it's clear that there's a lot of efficiency that can be gained, but not taking out the human elements that are really critical to doing TA and HR really well. Let's talk about what's next. I won't ask you what does 2030 look like, because I think none of us know. Let's be real. But what do you think is next, and how do we begin to prepare for it? Ariana.
Yeah. I think there's going to be so much conversation, or there already is, but so much more conversation about upskilling. How are you upskilling your talent? How are you upskilling yourself? How do we invest every day into learning new things and evolving with the technology that's evolving around us? And if we think about, when we were younger in school, we are learning constantly. And at work, sometimes it's easy to get into a routine. Things might feel like you're doing similar things every day. But I do think that it's really important to apply that same energy towards, are you learning new things? Are you reading about emerging technologies? Do you have an eye towards what Gen Z and Gen Alpha is discussing and talking about in the schools that they're going to? So I think that will be huge. And I learned of a pretty optimistic concept the other day called the Flynn effect, which is this concept in psychology that named after the psychologist James Flynn, who essentially saw that human IQ was increasing by 3 points every decade since the 1980s as technology has been supporting our learning and supporting our lifestyle. I thought that was so cool. We are essentially accelerating in our ability to learn and get smarter based on IQ scores over time. So the other thing that the Flynn effect kind of signals is that intelligence is not static. We like to think that our intelligence is a score on a test, but the thing that we're learning is that as long as you exercise the mind, then the mind is quite adaptable and malleable. And regardless of age, you can learn if you apply your mind to something. And so I really like that message, because I think sometimes we think, we're out of school, it's, that's not for me anymore. But I think science is slowly proving that we can continue learning throughout our lives.
Yeah, and I heard something on stage recently that people have a lot of FOGI around AI, and I was like, what's FOGI? Fear of jumping in. And I think that this is requiring us yet again. There's been so many times in our industry and just in the history of the world that we've had to pivot and we've had to upskill ourselves, or we, the HR teams, have to support people in helping grow with a growth mindset, right? I love that, Ariana. And I also love all of your, I feel like it's a Professor Moon session.
Yeah, totally. I love it.
Anisha, what about you? What hasn't AI figured out yet?
Yeah, well, I hope people are taking notes because of all these frameworks you have, Ariana. I love that. And yes, continuous learning is super important. So at Inscribe, we're realizing that we can't just build one fraud analyst agent to actually see productivity and efficiency gains for our customers. We need to start thinking about an AI ecosystem and multiple agents talking to each other for our customers, for our customers' internal team, our customers' leadership team, and having a tight feedback loop. And so I'd love to see something like that for HR and the entire employee life cycle. So I'd love to see that.
Ooh, I'd love to see that too, Anisha. So yeah, in terms of where I think we're going with AI and what's next, where we are today is that I think more and more companies are using AI to do tasks, whether it's writing job descriptions or things like that. I think we're going to continue to see that. I think that more and more companies are going to start using AI for processes, so process efficiency and things like that. So we go from tasks to processes. And I think the trend in terms of the big next thing is what I call meta solutions. And so what I think of is, typically a merit process is where finance, the CFO, typically comes and says, okay, CPO, CHRO, here's the merit pool, and now do your HR thing and figure out raises and all of that stuff. A meta solution would be having AI help us aggregate and synthesize vast, crazy quantums of data so that we understand here's how we are doing relative to the market right now, like compa ratio, this type of stuff. Here's how we're doing from a gender equality standpoint, et cetera. Here's how we're doing with all of these multifaceted factors. And instead of it being a CFO gives to CPO conversation, the meta solution is I think the future is going to be an AI data-backed suggestion that says CPO, CHRO, here is what the data would indicate in terms of if you wanted to get the majority of your workforce to this place. And then that enables us in the people profession to have a conversation with our CFO and friends in finance to say, okay, maybe it's a 4% pool that you want to give us for merit and promotions. All right, let's have a data-based conversation to say, is that going to solve our problem? Is that going to solve and honor our compensation philosophy? Is it going to address perhaps compensation as a driver of turnover, right, et cetera? So I think that we're moving into a world where AI is truly going to change how we're able to solve problems, which I think is very exciting.
Very exciting. Ladies, this has been so fun. I think what we should do a year from now is rewatch this, and we're going to be like, we thought that was cool, because just the rapid pace at which we're innovating here, and you three have been such great examples of really kind of leaning into it, but doing it thoughtfully and responsibly. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.